Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Our panelists are already lined up, so let's convene today's summit. And joining us today, Dr. Sona Kazemi, postdoctoral researcher from The Ohio State University in Columbus, Dr. Ori Goldberg, Iran expert from the Lauder School of Government at Ahman University. It's been a while, Dr. Goldberg. Good to have you back on the show. And Martin Himmel, political international security analyst. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. And our main topic, power put to the people. If the morality police in Iran is indeed on its way out, does it mean that the protests have won? Let's take a closer look and pick up the conversation right after.
According to reports, Iran is disbanding its controversial morality police. This comes after 2 months of intense protests in the country, sparked by the death and detention of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after her arrest by morality police for allegedly having incorrectly worn her hijab. The morality police are part of the country's attempt to keep the public in line with the Islamic values of the theocratic regime in Iran. These police have the power to stop women for improperly wearing the hijab and take them into custody for questioning. Thousands have been arrested during these intense 2 months of demonstrations, and some have faced the death penalty as the regime attempts to squash the protests that continue to sweep the country in the wake of Amini's death. Is the abolition of the morality police the first step to recognizing the success of the women's movement in Iran? Will there be an end to the headscarf mandate? And what does this mean for Iran?
So let's get to it. What is next for Iran's nationwide protest? As always, we begin with this quick fire round of 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the conversation right after. So, Dr. Kazemi, please take the lead.
Yeah, 100% no. I would say this is not a concession, and this is not what people want. People from the beginning have been chanting slogans that the dictator and the Islamic Republic should go. And from the beginning, they've said the target is the entirety of the clerical fascist system of Islamic Republic. This has nothing to do with just abolishing the morality police. It's just this. It's just misleading, and it's just propaganda from the state, just spreading rumors that is not even true.
Okay, Dr. Goldberg, your take?
I tend to agree, but I think perhaps we should not rush completely into assuming that the abolition of the Islamic Republic is the only target. I think that the Islamic Republic flinched. And I think that because it flinched, we might be looking at another future, another scenario for this revolution that does not have to end in overall violence or in a flight from Iran like the Shah did in 1979.
Last but not least, Martin Himmel, your take?
I agree that Iran did flinch, and it's very important that it flinched. Excuse me. It's very important that it flinched because that means that the protesters will be more emboldened. The protesters will take more action. They'll see results with no. But let's be sure here: the police has not been disbanded. They're not on the streets. They're not out there, but they have not been disbanded.
Okay, and maybe someone can get a glass of water for Mr. Martin Himmel. I hope the control room, can take care of that. So let's begin our conversation, and please feel free to interact from this point onwards, of course. So is it a first step on behalf of the regime in recognizing the success of the protest, or is it the first and essentially the last such a step, Dr. Kazemi?
I think for the past 44 years, we have had enough time to think. And I say that as an Iranian myself who has lived under the Islamic Republic for 20 years. I'm not rushing. I've been living under this state for so long, and for 44 years is not a little time. It's a very long time for the people of Iran who have been resisting against this state. And we have tried every possible scenario under this sun, reforms, different kinds of reforms, different factions of the state. Nothing has worked. And therefore, this the fact that what we want is not a prediction of the future, but we know exactly what we want. If people want to predict, they might be rushing into different predictions, and we are not psychics. Therefore, talking about what people want is one thing, predicting the future is another. And the state has been scrambling for the past 77 days, trying to crack down on the protesters, trying to come up with different propaganda techniques to say, oh, this is separatists, or this is Israel, or this is US, this is CIA, this is Western what is it called? Intervention. This is people who want to become naked. They've tried, but the truth is, yes, they have flinched and they're scared, and that's how authoritarianism works. A state is always scared because they know that they have no legitimacy.
But maybe it's just an attempt on behalf of the regime to restore faith, not by force, but by, again, to restore public trust to an extent, Dr. Goldberg.
It is, I think, an attempt by the regime, but I agree with Dr. Kazemi that it is too little and too late. That is not to say necessarily that the regime is about to collapse. I think that the situation on the ground is a little more complex. I think the Islamic Republic was hated, but I think the Islamic Republic was also accepted by quite a few Iranians as a necessary evil. And as proof of that, we have the fact that the Islamic Republic had yet to see, up until this wave of resistance and opposition that looks like victorious oppositions have looked in Iran over the last 100 years. So I think we're not necessarily going to see the demise of the Islamic Republic. I agree that certainly public will appears to be focused on that, but there's still some time before this movement has the symbolic capital, let's call it, to place itself as an immediate alternative to the Islamic Republic once it goes away.
But I think, please, Martin.
Yes, I think that what's really important here, there was this solid foundation. There still is a solid foundation of the Iranian government and its position in Iranian society. But an important block has been removed. Is it going to knock down the whole foundation? Probably not. But it's going to shake it. And I think it's more of a case of maybe what we saw in Britain in the 13th century with the Magna Carta, that the voice, that's what the start was for the end of the monarchy. It took 500-600 years. But I'm not saying it's going to take 500-600 years in Iran, but it might be the start of the dilution of their absolute power. Because if they're going to solve this problem, they're going to have to give some leeway. And if women are going to walk the streets of Tehran without hijabs, that is going to be an important shaking of the infrastructure of the Islamic Republic.
But can the regime modernize itself while still keeping loyal to its core values? Is there an in-between here?
The regime has never been monolithic.
No, 100%.
Even though the Islamic Republic has appeared and has been presented as a single monolith, the regime has never been monolithic. What we're seeing now is the struggles in power of those who are currently wielding power. And they call themselves revolutionaries now. They used to be called hardliners. The reformists, as Dr. Kazemi mentioned, are no longer a credible option. But the Islamic Republic has always had a strain of pragmatism, an ability to withstand very interesting and complex difficulties within Iran and outside Iran. This isn't a regime that leans exclusively on brute force. And what we're seeing now could also include the unraveling of the unity within the regime. And once again, we're going to see two separate factions. And that's a thing that we've actually been used to seeing in the Islamic Republic ever since it was founded.
Dr. Kazemi, you're saying no way. You can't have eat the cake and have it too.
No, 100% not. I'll tell you one thing. There are three pillars of the Islamic Republic. One is controlling women's bodies and sexuality through hijab and safeguarding the boundaries of genders. The other one is hate for America, and the other one is hate for Israel. So any of these three, if that falls, Islamic Republic will not exist the way it is. So we just need to do a fact checking before, because of this media reports that even the morality police has been abolished. That's not what happened. So what happened is, in a press conference, someone asked that this top prosecutor, Sayyid Jafar Montazeri, why was the guidance patrol not around anymore? And Montazeri said the patrol wasn't the business of the judiciary, but of the of the police. So, and I quote, they launched it and they shot it themselves. And then he hastily added that the judiciary would still monitor behavior of the society. So the guidance patrol, or what was called the Committee of the Islamic Republic at the beginning of the revolution, I mean, it's not dismantled. And even if it is dismantled at some point, it's still the law. Hijab is a law. Even if the guidance patrol doesn't go around to like enforce it in the shopping malls or in the parks, it is still the law, and it exists. And the segregation in the society exists. The buses, the schools, the mosques, everything is gender segregated. It's a gender apartheid system, and it cannot be dismantled by just one thing.
But Dr. Kazemi, if you say that one of the three pillars of the Islamic Republic was hatred for America, it was the Islamic Republic who signed a nuclear agreement with America and who accepted potential diplomatic relations with America. It's the Islamic Republic that is still trying to reanimate the agreement in negotiations with the United States. I'm not objecting at all to what you're saying about a gender apartheid.
Yeah.
It is. They signed the agreement.
They signed the agreement because they needed money. That's the only reason. It's not because of love for America or accepting America or the world order.
They signed the agreement because they thought it was a politically viable decision for them. And there's another thing that I'd like to mention about Iranian history.
But they still said death to America, and they
still say death to America. You're absolutely correct. But all Iranian dictators know that they can ignore the public at their own peril. The Iranian dictators, as repressive as they might be, and the Shah was as repressive, know full well that they cannot ignore the public, because Iran, in unprecedented fashion, has a history of successful popular rebellion. I think the Islamic Republic knows this well, and I think that there is a division within the Islamic Republic, a division that was apparent about a year and a half ago, and they were arguing about what sort of confidence-building measures the Islamic Republic should take with regard to its citizenship. Now, I'm not arguing at all with what you're saying. It's a vile dictatorship. It's gender apartheid. Everything is there. But the Islamic Republic is quite capable of pragmatism. It has a strain of pragmatism that's been there since it was founded.
I agree with you, but not. Yes, I agree with you that it's very pragmatic in that sense, but it doesn't think about national interest. It only thinks about its own viability and the militia groups that it has all over the region. They are kind of the groups that are supported by this state rather than the people of Iran. So they think about their survivorship.
I think that what could happen with all this, when you talk about pragmatism, is that maybe the leadership in Iran will think it's probably a good time to reduce the sanctions significantly, because that way they could placate the people. To reduce the sanctions significantly, it might be more eager than it has been in a long time to reach a deal with the United States and other countries, because if it can ease the economic hardship, maybe that will ease also some of the motivation for demonstrations. That might be something they might be thinking in Iran. Another issue that we should look at is, how are the neighbors looking at what's going in Iran? How is Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Israel, and are looking at what's going on in Iran? And I bet they are going to test the waters to see how much resolve the Iranian government has now when its foundations are being shaken. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates went into an agreement with Israel, basically because it wanted to have some sort of force that would...
We will get to the international ramifications of the domestic situation of the Islamic Republic right after the break, a short break, and we're back with part 2 of the summit. Don't go anywhere.